This podcast contains spoilers, so listen at your own risk or call back after you've watched the movie.
You know who you call. Leave a message. Maybe they'll call you back. Then again, maybe they won't.
We're having ourselves quite a little game of phone tag here.
Ring, ring, ring. I usually get this guy's answering machine.
I'll call you right back.
If you're there, please pick up the phone. I really want to talk to you.
I check my fucking messages every day when I come home from work. My answering machine, zero. I got a blinking light.
All I have to do is pick up this phone right here, inform the cinema, and your plan's kaput.
No, I ain't got no phone. I had to pull, because people calling all the time, and who needs the aggravation, right? Interruptions.
Hey man, it's 12:30 on a school night. Just got done watching the assembly cut of Alien 3. It's funny, just looked up, the movie came out less than a year after Terminator 2. Both giant, blockbuster sci-fi action sequels. Both sort of James Cameron related. Certainly both sequels to a James Cameron movie in Terminator and Aliens. And both end with the hero committing suicide by jumping into a vat of molten metal or something, because basically their continued survival would doom the entire universe. Not much else in common between the films, but yeah, I knew you were working your way through the Alien movies in preparation for Romulus, and I've seen Alien and Aliens a whole bunch of times. I think I've seen extended editions, regular editions of both those movies. I've seen them both in the cinema. Huge fan of both of those films. They're fantastic movies. But then everything else in the franchise, I've only seen once. This was only my second time ever watching Alien 3, and my first time watching the assembly cut, which I think is basically the studio who completely screwed over Fincher and cut him out of the process and completely took the film away from him, then going back to his notes and trying to make an unofficial director's cut. But I was thinking I'd imagine we're coming to this film from very different angles, because although I've seen Alien and Aliens many times and I have a lot of reverence for them, it's also been years since I've seen either of those movies. And I'm not engaging in this big project of watching all the Alien movies. I'm just throwing on a movie in isolation, and that's Alien 3. So I am naturally drawn to compare it to my memory of the other movies, but I don't have that direct, I saw Aliens yesterday, today I'm watching Alien 3 kind of thing. I'd imagine that nowadays, most people, if they're watching Alien 3, it's because they're watching the Alien movies. I don't think there's many people kind of just checking out Alien 3. But it's a movie I've been curious about for a very long time. I've watched it now tonight, quite late, quite tired. Not falling asleep, but, quite tired. And I think the only other time I've seen it, I was probably about, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12. And also, I think watched it late at night and tired, and it's a bit of a slow burn. I always forget how slow burn these movies are. I think Alien and Aliens have an enormous amount of the beginning of the movie kind of without any real action happening. There's certainly tension and there's build up, and I'm not saying that they're just kind of a mumblecore movie for an hour, but still they kind of take their time before they really, bring out the fireworks. And this film does that as well, but this film also it never reaches anything close to the intensity of Aliens. I'm not sure if that was the intention or not, but Aliens is it's a contender for Cameron's best movie, and it is definitely an example of Cameron doing what he does best in terms of just just escalation, sustained to tension and action. And yeah, this movie it feels like it never quite knows how to do the alien stuff. It can do the lore stuff, and as the franchise has continued, especially when Ridley Scott's return to it with Prometheus and Covenant, it's always felt like the fleshing out and broadening of the lore is detrimental to what the Alien franchise does best, or what the first two movies did best. And that's kind of why I'm attracted to the idea of Romulus. I don't know anything about it, but I know it's Fede Alvarez, who I can't see making a movie that isn't like pretty direct tension entertainment, rather than like some big sort of like nerdy compendium of like the Wayland Corporation history or whatever. This film, you get into it and like it feels like you're in episode 1 of a TV show. Like the amount of thought and detail, like, so it's a prison. It's a prison, like it's basically like a gulag. So it's a prison, but you work like a kind of being sent off to the labor camps or something, designed to hold 5,000 people, 5,000 inmates. But now there's only 25 inmates. Like that's intriguing, but like we don't get much to kind of tie that together. And you know, but the prisoners and the guards they're not particularly antagonistic to one another. They're almost all sort of working together on the same page. There's barely any distinction between them. The prisoners have all become religious. There's some discussion of how like the character 85 isn't a believer, and like, but what is their religion? Like it's very vague. They've taken a vow of celibacy. There's so much lore going on in this movie, and I like that a lot, and it's what the film kind of does best. I mean, I actually quite like Alien 3 now upon revisiting it, but it's weird watching it because you're like, I like this, I like that, I love this is great, this is great. This movie doesn't really work because it's not an effective Alien movie. It's not a terrible Alien movie either, but we've seen Alien Covenant at this point, which is about as bad as a film can get. This is just a fairly reliable. To be honest, if it didn't have to be compared to like the two best sci-fi monster movies of all time directly before it, then it would, if it was just sort of a standalone, you know, like Event Horizon or something, it's just some like random sci-fi horror action special effects movie that they've made, you know, like Pitch Black or something, where they just make a movie, throw it out there in the world, you watch it, and you're not comparing it to anything. Then I think this would be just like a really solid watch. It still can't quite do the excitement value, the entertainment value at the end when they get to the like the action scenes, the plans they have, the narrative contrivances required to make the alien get freed again, and this, that, and the other. It's a bit chaotic, it's a bit all over the place, and it more to the point, it's never really that tense. But the world is really interesting. In ways it's really interesting. In other ways it's kind of a bit like I'm a bit unsure about it. Like one bugbear I have is, why is it that other than the black guy who's like the preacher guy and Sigourney Weaver, more or less everyone in the movie has an English accent, and like a specific English accents, regional accents, stuff like that. And so you go, well, what is this then? Are these, because it's always, the Alien franchise has always been like, you know, either American, because they're American movies and that's sort of the default, or like a bunch of different accents coming from different places. And you kind of get the impression then that Earth is like, or like humanity is just sort of like very multicultural and integrated and stuff. But in this one, it's like, well, is this a prison affiliated with England, or are they not supposed to be English accents? Is that not supposed to be taken as literally as like England? It's more just like, forget that, ignore that, you know, it's sci-fi. That's distracting to me. It feels like, you know, why would you put so much Ken Loach vibes in your crazy sci-fi prison planet universe world, you know? There's missteps. Also, I'll say that like Fincher's famously disowned this movie, and kind of people, I think Fincher fans, and I loved Fincher growing up. I loved Seven, I loved Fight Club, I loved his more popcorn movies like The Game and Panic Room. Like I really, really loved him growing up. And yeah, right up through Social Network, even Gone Girl. I think now he's kind of lost his way a bit. The last couple have been, they just haven't had that pizzazz. But yeah, Zodiac's great. And I think for a lot of Fincher fans, they would just like not even include this. Like if they were ranking Fincher movies, they would just not even include Alien 3 because he's disowned it. We know that he didn't have final cut on the movie. We know that he didn't get to deliver his artistic vision because he didn't have enough control over the project, and people say that's why he's such a control freak now in the way he makes films. But watching it now, it's so Fincher in so many respects. Like, it's absolutely stunning often. Sometimes it gets a bit visually boring because you're just in corridor after corridor and it starts to look a bit the same, and it's the same looking guys going down the same looking corridors. But in the early scenes where you've got like, you know, now we're in a kind of morgue area, now we're in, I mean, the very beginning of the movie, which is set outdoors in that kind of like stormy sea, rainy, rocky beach kind of environment. Like that's stunning. That's absolutely gorgeous. There's so much really, really compelling visuals in the film. The lice, like the lice are incredible. All these like yaks, and yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in the movie. But then, you know, for every compliment you can pay it, then you go the fact that so often when you're looking at the alien, it's composited into the shots with a completely different kind of contrast. The blacks on the alien are practically white when compared to the blacks of the environment that it's in. So that just looks really hokey. We've seen Alien, which was, the alien was terrifying in that, and then we've seen Aliens, which is like, you know, one of the best concepts ever. It's like, what about if it was aliens, not alien, aliens? Like, so we've had that like escalation, and we've had the Queen and all of the insanity of aliens, and then we go to Alien 3 and it's one little alien just scurrying around. It looks like a little puppy, just, you know, it's like they've got like a angry little chihuahua running around the ship, and they still get some cool shots. Like, I mean, obviously the most iconic shot in the movie is Ripley like cowering away, like pressing her head against the wall, and the alien coming in and like holding its face like right up to hers. And the idea of it not wanting to kill her is great. Not used as well as it could be. Like, I don't think they really do much in this movie in terms of like set pieces, well staged action beats, or even like particularly well crafted horror beats. There's nice jump scares here and there, like the kind of head of the prison when he gets given the big speech. He's basically just convinced them that she's crazy and that there's no alien or whatever, and then it comes down out of the air shaft or the ventilation shaft or whatever. There's good moments like that. There's a lot of good stuff in the movie. I think we talk a lot about watching a movie and sort of whether you're on side or not. And I think this is a movie that got me on side with its amazing visuals, with its cool ideas, like the like buffalo or whatever it is, chest burster scene, which apparently isn't in the theatrical cut. It's interesting. One of the most striking scenes in this is not actually in the theatrical cut. Fucking roasting here. Want some more. Yeah. But then it's, as I said, it's a bit inconsistent. It's inconsistent quality wise, and it doesn't give you what you really need out of one of these movies. That's the big crime. I actually don't mind the inconsistent quality wise, because I kind of like it as a bit of an oddity, as a bit of a, it's obviously, it was very poorly received when it was released, and then it's developed this cult following over the years, and it kind of works well as that sort of hidden gem cult movie. That approaching it in that way sets your expectations in a fairly good place for it, and it kind of allows me to navigate all of the rough around the edges, inconsistencies and flaws throughout it. But the big crime of the movie, the thing that it can't really recover from, and that probably keeps it as like, I'll watch it this time, but I probably won't ever watch it again, and I probably won't really be like ever raving about it. The thing that holds it back is it doesn't have the goods when it becomes the alien chase movie. It doesn't get the alien right. It doesn't get the magic of the sort of third act / second half of one of these movies, where it's just like, fuck man, the alien is just picking everyone off, we're doomed, how the hell are we gonna, it's a sequel to the ultimate masterclass in handling that. So yeah. But yeah, I liked, cool cast. Henry Sellers from Father Ted. Took me a while to work out who it was, because he's bald in this, obviously, but nice seeing him. Obviously Postlethwaite and Charles Dance. Yeah, like lots of cool little actors. Some I knew, some I didn't know, but it's also then even if you look at that like ensemble, then you think about the amazing ensemble of soldiers, or the amazing ensemble of blue collar workers, and Alien. So even then, like it is missing something. It does make me wish that Fincher had made more, or will make more, I guess, blockbuster kind of like big sci-fi. I just don't think that he could really, because when he's doing like 40 takes per every single shot in the movie, I don't know if that lends itself well to like blockbuster filmmaking. Although nowadays everything would be CGI, so it's not, they could probably film the latest Alien movie, for all I know, it might just be filmed in the volume or something, to film the whole thing in one tiny little room. Also Holt McEnany, or whatever he's called, the guy that Fincher seems to work with on every project, he pops up as well. So that was nice seeing that, a little bit of Fincherness there. But as I said, that there's a lot of stuff that like reminds me of Seven, in just like the grit and the grime of like just how textured every shot is, and how gorgeous and cinematic a lot of this movie is. Often when I watch older movies, I'm just like, oh man, they really just don't make them like this anymore, in terms of the fact it's obviously shot on film, like any movie of this era was. Everything you're seeing is in camera. There's the alien is composited in, but even that's not CGI, or I think it might be one or two shots that are CGI. Most of it's like just stop motion animation or something like that. Puppetry, probably. Nowadays, just none of this would be real. Like, forget about the alien, like the walls, the floor, the lights, the, you know, cables, tiles and ventilation piping and shafts and all of this like industrial set design that we see in these movies. Like, they just wouldn't make that now, because they'd be like, well, it'd be ridiculous to make it. People won't be able to tell the difference. And when you're watching it, you can't tell it's not real. But then when you watch something that's really real like this, combine the fact that it's actual real shit on screen and that it's 35mm, that immediately bumps the experience up. Just so much more visceral an experience watching that. But then I think the collateral result of doing it all for real is that you had to care so much more about every shot and the composition, because you're just burning through money. Whereas now it just doesn't feel, I just don't get that sense of style as much from movies. Like, this movie, for all its flaws, like, would have been one of the big movies of the year it came out. If you compare this to the Marvels or like whatever's like the big movies of the year now, it just, you know, and that's not me comparing this to like, we're comparing the Marvels to Back to the Future or like a 5-star. I'm comparing it to Alien 3, which like is a decent movie. It's not a masterpiece. It's not one of the best blockbusters of all time, but still, going back to a blockbuster from this era, unless it's one of the worst ones of its time, it's just going to give you so much more of a stimulating experience, I think. But yeah, anyway, glad I watched the assembly cut. I obviously can't really remember the original. Like, I remember bits and pieces, but I certainly don't remember enough to have to do a sort of side-by-side comparison. I just know that the chest-busting scene of the buffalo isn't in the theatrical cut, and that's because I've read that online. I think I might maybe tomorrow check out like a comparison of all the changes. But I think the further this movie went on, the less it knew what it was doing, it felt like. And I don't know if that's like Fincher being kind of pushed out and maybe someone else coming in shooting a lot of stuff, or Fincher just becoming disillusioned with the project, or if it's completely irrelevant. But I think when it comes down to the action adventure stuff at the end, it's not terrible. Like, it's just very by the numbers, serviceable, is what I would expect from just like a standard formulaic version of this movie. Whereas the first act is very engaging. It is still a bit too humorless. Like, you need a bit more of the Bill Paxton energy going on, I think. The movie's very serious and dark. One thing I will say though is the much maligned decision to kill off Newt and, is it Hicks, between Aliens and Alien 3. I'm actually all in favour for that. I mean, like, I certainly don't want Newt around in Alien 3. I get that, like, if you've just finished watching Alien 2, or if you've recently watched Alien 2, it feels like a betrayal. It feels almost like it's like undermining the third act of that movie to go like, oh yeah, they just die straight away. Like, it's like all of that was for nothing. But the alternative, if you are going to make a sequel to Aliens, the alternative is having a movie where she's got a kid sidekick the entire time. Like, I don't want that. I don't want a movie where, I don't want this like Scream 5 type situation where you're getting like, you're building out some sort of gang, like a crew, like Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that. That is horrific. So yeah, I think you could certainly argue that they should have stopped at Aliens and then never made another movie in the franchise. But if you're going to make more movies, like, I don't want a gang. I'm also curious to see how they get Ripley back for Resurrection, because again, Resurrection I haven't seen since more or less when it came out. So I guess it came out like 97 or something like that. And I'm assuming she's they got a bit of her DNA out of the molten metal and cloned her or something. But anyway, perhaps I'll check that out. Do love Jean-Pierre Jeunet, so maybe I should have a look at that. I'm not sure if there's a director's cut of that about, but maybe I'll have a look now. It is interesting. One thing I like is watching or kind of like working my way through a franchise when they just kept on deciding to make another movie, as opposed to what we get now, where they plan the movies. So you've either got like we're adapting a book series like Harry Potter, or it's just a machine like Marvel or something where it's not that we're adapting a series of books, even though those are comic books, but they're not literally adapting like a series of books. But they're making, when they make a movie, it's made in a way that's like accommodating more movies being made. Whereas if you look at some of these classic franchises like Terminator and Aliens, every time they make a movie, almost they're like going, we can kill the main character, we can just do anything. Like we're in no way trying to preserve the integrity of the franchise. We're just trying to do everything we can for this movie. And maybe it's just because we don't get that as much anymore now, and that's kind of not how big, like large scale. I mean, I remember watching Dungeons and Dragons there last year and I quite enjoyed it, but it's not even a sequel, it's the first movie, and it's already clear that like a lot of the thought that's gone into this movie is the franchise, because it's like, why would you ever even contemplate making a big sort of effects driven adventure blockbustery type movie if not to build at the very least a franchise, but probably realistically a universe, an expanded universe with spin-offs and TV shows and stuff like that. So it just makes every individual film feel a little bit sort of like they couldn't really go that far with it because it's just one episode of a TV show, and they're a little bit hamstrung by that obligation to a bigger picture. They have to play it more safe. Like when Alien 3 came out, it must have been kind of like, people hated it, but who cares? Everyone showed up and bought a ticket because it was a sequel to Aliens. Whereas now there's just a lot more on the line, I think. I don't know. It's more entertaining because you're like, anything could happen. I'm not just watching episode 5 of a TV show, although this does feel very televisual a lot of the time. It's just too small, and it gets smaller and smaller as it goes on. And I just wanted some crazy big shots. They delivered in that regard in the first third of the movie, but then it gets more and more subdued and starts to feel like an episode of The Outer Limits or something, where it's like we're stuck in a facility with an alien. It's like, yeah, that is Alien, but give me something more. Anyway, glad I watched it. Really happy to have revisited it. Really happy to have sort of satisfied the curiosity I had for years. I'm happy to have watched it kind of with my knowledge of the franchise, because I'm sure when I saw it first, I didn't have much of that. And also, like, it's got its reputation. These people talk about the reputation of like the Phantom Menace or Terminator 3. It doesn't have to be a super famous thing that people talk about all the time, but whatever it is, when it's part of a series, the decided communal like opinion on the movie becomes so enshrined that it is almost like the truth. and you end up not necessarily parroting it, but you kind of end up thinking it in a way, or just thinking of it like that is what that movie is, or you're like you're kind of like rallying against that. But in either way, I think with these franchises, it's very easy to kind of fall into like these camps about whether you're an Alien 3 guy or you're not, or whatever. And that's one reason I'm quite happy to have seen it on its own, unlike you, who you're watching it as part of like a bigger project, to just sit down and watch Alien 3 and just go, let's check out this movie. How good is this movie? And what is this movie like, more to the point? And yeah, I felt it had a lot to offer. I'm glad to have watched it. And yeah, I've seen the thing it actually reminds me of is that I've never seen Alien versus Predator Requiem, which means that, annoyingly, I've seen every Alien movie bar one. I don't think I'm going to enjoy Requiem, but probably should watch it. And then I can tick off the last few Predator movies I haven't seen, because there's a couple of those more recent ones that I haven't checked out. Also intrigued by the Alien TV show that the guy who made the Fargo TV show has coming out, which I think is called Alien Earth, which is a location I don't think I've ever visited, although Prometheus opening scene is that Earth with these like people creating the universe. Anyway, I'm hoping Romulus is very light on lore and is more like just old school horror like the first one. But enjoyed this. What do you think? Fan?
Hey man, just back from my day's work now. Got in from the sweltering heat. Gonna have a nice cold iced coffee and chill out. Yeah, are you even able to say it's a school night when your daughter isn't in school? Unless she is, and I live in the interstellar universe where time moves completely differently. Although my other friend does say I live by a different time scale as everyone else, but it can't be that long. Can you say school night? Anyway, yeah, it's good that you made the argument, or at least came from Alien 3, the assembly cut, from the point of view of somebody who's just putting on a movie, judging it without the weight of the franchise, judging it as just a standalone Saturday night movie, just put on, hoping to see something at a very casual level. It's good that you're the voice in this conversation for that perspective, because, as you mentioned, because Alien Romulus is coming out next Friday, I believe it's coming out 16th of August, I've taken it upon myself to watch these movies in chronological order. Get off my laptop, get off. Can't get on my laptop, fuck's sake. Get off that. Right, 1 second there. Yeah, and obviously I did Prometheus, Alien Covenant, Alien, and Aliens in about a week and a half maybe. And I have to say, this is my least favorite one of the bunch. Even with the assembly cut, you can only reconfigure something based on material that was there and based on material one. So I'm not sure how much of a victory David Fincher even won with this footage and what he managed to do. So bear in mind, no matter what I say about Alien 3 in this message, because there is a lot to talk about, there is an interesting conversation to be had. But just know, it's from the point of view of somebody who really did not have a good time with this movie at all. I really didn't. Even so much to say that I preferred Alien Covenant on rewatch. And that's not to say Alien Covenant is a good movie. In fact, it's a terrible movie. As I think, in a lot of ways, Alien 3 is a terrible movie. At least in my second viewing, I might add, of Alien Covenant, I expected it to be really bad, and then I was able to have fun with how bad it was. So there was some enjoyment to be ascertained from it. In Alien 3, the assembly cut, I just found it really hard to watch and completely unenjoyable. And you mentioned that it's funny that the ending of this movie is Ripley putting herself in molten oil or volcanic fire or whatever the fuck it is in a steel factory or whatever it is very reminiscent of the end of Terminator 2. And you mentioned there's not many other similarities. I would argue that there is a Sarah Connorification of Ripley in this movie that probably is as a result of how Sarah Connor changes in Terminator 2. And in a way, we got that in between Alien and Aliens before we got it with Sarah Connor in Terminator 2, which would have been, I think, 1991. But it's done in a much less masculine way. And what I mean by that is now I need to take on the masculine features and act like a man in order to be badass. That's what happened to Sarah Connor in Terminator 2. That's what happened Ripley in this, I think. And they managed to do it in a different way in Aliens, where it doesn't feel so much like she's become a badass bitch in the traditional masculine way we get with a lot of these females when they try and make them kick ass. It still feels true to Ripley, the character. And I hate to go down this road because obviously things can change, and I don't really take on the persona very often of, oh, they wrecked the character. But I do think they did make significant changes to the character in this movie that really felt very untrue, at least from watching Alien to Aliens to Alien 3. Obviously, they made changes for her in Aliens as well. But in this, it just felt very untrue and very strange pivot of the character than in the previous movies, even when there was a slight pivot. And it's interesting to talk of the director's cut and the assembly cut and things like that. There's a crucial scene in Aliens that actually recontextualizes the whole movie, and it was left out of the theatrical cut, which is the one I watched. And the nucleus and the core of that scene is in everything that happens in the movie, and it changes the dynamic, and it is very much there thematically. So I don't really know why they got rid of the scene. And that scene is that when Ripley comes out of cryo in Aliens, she has been asleep for 58 years, and in the deleted scene, she just misses her daughter's funeral. And that would totally recontextualize and explain why she's so maternal with Newt. And obviously, that's contrasted with the alien being maternal and trying to protect her eggs. And that scene's omission does seem like it needs to be in, and that scene is thematically there. And I just bring this up because I do have a list of a few of the things that's changed based on Alien 3 and the assembly cut. And I wonder in what way do they enhance it, and in what way did they contextualize it, and in what way did they change things, which obviously you can't be sure unless you watch Alien 3 and then you watch Alien 3 assembly cut back to back. And one of the things is, which you've mentioned in your opening message, in the opening of your message, is that it's very similar to the ending of Terminator 2. Well, the executives actually thought that, and in the theatrical release of Alien 3, to make it different, the alien actually bursts out of her stomach as she is thrown into the fire pit or whatever it is. And in this, it's been removed, and we get this version, which I feel like this is better. And the effects are absolutely terrible and rushed and whatever. I don't know if that's in the theatrical version, but this version seems absolutely all over the place. One of the other changes is, and you've alluded to this as well, in the fact that you said the alien acts a lot like a dog in this. Well, apparently the change was made that there is a chest bursting scene in the theatrical cut, but the alien actually comes out of a dog, believe it or not. And in the assembly cut, it is an ox. And apparently they had really a lot of problems trying to get the ox to do what it was meant to do, so they just left it. But it works quite well actually in this, that it does come out of an ox, and it does lend a bit of credence to the fact that, okay, it is one alien, but Alien Ripley references that I've never seen an alien like this before. And are we now to wonder that the incubation period is different in a ox to a human, and that makes the alien perhaps more powerful? I don't know. It's never really explored like anything in this movie, but it is interesting. And in the theatrical cut, there's not a scene of the alien getting captured and escaping. They got rid of that, so it's like the alien never did get captured, and I think that's absolutely fine to leave out. I'm trying to think of a few other changes. Oh yeah, the scene where she wakes up on the beach is not in the theatrical cut. I think that's a great scene. It gives us context to the planet. It gives us context to the lice on the island. It gives us a beautiful exterior shot. Very good scene, and that's removed. And in the theatrical cut, she just wakes up in a pod. I think that's pretty bad. And interestingly, the most iconic scene that makes it in the theatrical cut and makes it in this cut, which is the alien going up against Ripley's face in the med lab area. Fincher was refused that scene and just went with a camera, grabbed it, filmed it himself, guerrilla, brought Ripley along, and brought Sigourney Weaver along and made it work. And that is probably the best scene in the movie. So yeah, that seems to me very much the difference without actually having watched the two movies. And I almost wish I watched the shorter movie, because I felt like 2 hours, 25 minutes of this was a lot for a very dull movie. And you brought up the decision to kill Newt and I think his name is Hicks. I can't remember the actor's name, but he played John Reese in Terminator 1. That they don't make it, and this movie cheapens the death of cheapens the ending of Aliens. I would agree it cheapens the Aliens. Also because it takes place just after the events of Aliens. So it just feels like, okay, what, this happened straight after this movie now. I agree, I didn't want to see any more Newt. It's the most you can get out of it. The movie is so good, Aliens, I mean, that we can ignore the fact that it's got a terrible child character who's terrible actress shouting stupid things, but the character itself is useful to the plot, so we forgive it. So nobody wants to see Newt in the movie again. But there is other ways. You could just set this movie later and have her being adopted somewhere on Earth, or just a line of dialogue. You know, this isn't the Star Wars saga. They just showed up in the movie, and then Hicks never recovered from his wounds, so couldn't fucking do much. So now Newt lives with him. You know, a line of dialogue is fine. So just the way they got killed was almost in between movies, so it doesn't mean anything to this movie. Ripley never grapples with it in the slightest, and it cheapens the last movie. So the placement of it was even bad. They could even have had her cryogenically frozen and wake up later and do a retcon of the story that got cut from Aliens even, and that all those people are dead now because it's 100 years later. There's a lot of things they could have done with it, but I digress. So you mentioned the prison and the setting and the lore, and the lore is very interesting to you. I think this is the worst type of lore that I absolutely despise in movies, and that's window dressing lore. It's lore clothing. It's the type of lore that doesn't mean anything. We're going to make this guy a wizard. We're going to make this guy a grand mage. I can't think of anything else but fantasy references because I'm playing Dragon Age Inquisition so much at the moment. But it's like when you assign this guy a role, but it might as well be his name. This guy is a policeman, and it just has no bearing on anything in the movie. And I feel like the lore in this movie has absolutely no bearing on anything because it isn't thought out. It's just window dressing. This is going to be a prison. There's going to be people here. They're going to be religious. They're going to be a bunch of rapists. They're going to be this. And it just doesn't add anything to it. And I feel like after Aliens, maybe the idea for the script was, oh, maybe we can't top Marines in terms of toughness. So what if it was the most vile, disgusting bunch of people imaginable and they were pitted against the alien? What would that be like? I feel like maybe that's where the nucleus of an idea is in this movie, and it's just never explored. And I mentioned a Ripley acting weird. She just comes out and she's so confrontational and she's so counteractive to survival instinct, which she has in abundance in Alien and Aliens. She's just so smart. And in this, she's advised to stay away from the men because they've never seen a woman and they're completely a bunch of rapists. And then she immediately puts herself around them. And I don't know the reason for that in terms of, oh, is she so badass? Does she not give a shit? There's an off-script reason you could give for it, that the eggs inside of her makes her more, I don't know, tough, makes her more, I don't know. But maybe you could argue that she's acting differently because there's eggs inside of her and that changes her actions. You could certainly make that argument if you wanted to. I don't think it's there, but sure. And even the sets in this, coming off Aliens, where the set is a character in itself, and how deep we get into the alien nest, and how claustrophobic everything is, and how real everything is, and how just engulfed we are in it. in this, and it was kind of confirmed later by me reading up on the making of this movie, but I felt like this was someone built a wacky playhouse, had no idea what to do with it, and then tried to build a movie around it in the same way that Tom Cruise now and Christopher McQuarrie build a whole movie around a stunt and work backwards. I think you showed me that article and I read an article about that. This feels like they had a set to work with and they were going to build a story around a set because the set was there. And apparently they originally did have this set constructed for a completely different script. Maybe it was set in a prison, maybe it was something got to do with something, but the script had completely been demolished by the time they got to the story of this movie to be rewritten. So it feels like a wacky playhouse where they've got stuff to run around, to film, and they're desperately trying to build something around it. And there's absolutely nothing there. It's completely hollow, in my opinion. As you mentioned, a perfect example of this is, you mentioned, why are the why are the fucking prisoners all going around with these really strong English accents? Like, what's the lore behind that? You know what? There ain't no fucking lore behind that. Probably filmed it in England. Probably is the reason. Maybe they wanted a class of accent to sound dogged and tough. There's absolutely no in-script reason and no thought why those prisoners are that way. And I feel like there is no thought, rhyme, reason for anything that's assembled and cobbled together in this movie that they're trying desperately to build something around. And I feel like there's only lore in this movie if you've got a creative mind and it allows you to think of things that aren't there. Oh, I wonder what's the reason why that is. I wonder why the reason is that there's so little prisoners. I don't know. Maybe they had to strip down the budget and that's the reason. Like, I don't think anything in film in this movie is really there for any reason. And even taking this separately as a pitch black, as a monster of the week movie or something like that that's decent, I don't think it's even decent. There's no real scares in this movie. There's no real thrills in this movie. There's no real use of a central monster. For instance, in the first Alien, we get to see the alien maybe in 4 scenes, maybe 3 scenes. But there's so much tension and so much atmosphere and so much of a vibe built around the fact that the alien exists that you don't even need the alien. And in Alien 3, there's a lot of time without the alien, but there's no real atmosphere. There's no real scare. There's no real thrill to this movie at all. And Alien was made in 1979. Aliens was made in 1986. Having watched them this week, the use of the alien in terms of the special effects and the technology that they use, in my opinion, holds up very well. Brilliant use of it. It's very scary. It looks real. It looks tangible. And the execution of the alien and the aliens is absolutely fantastic. In this, they switched over to CGI, and probably Fincher is obsessed with CGI. Anyway, isn't he obsessed? Sorry, he's not obsessed with CGI. He's obsessed with digital. So I feel like he would have been maybe happy to use the technology that was there at the time. And it's 1992, and boy, does it feel dated. It feels like something that you would see maybe from the first season and the second season of Buffy. Probably not as bad as that, but not a million miles away, where it's just so distracting that the alien isn't there. And there is movies where the effects are pretty bad, but the atmosphere and the tone you've managed to build has allowed you to be like, okay, I'm just going to ignore the fact that this alien is really bad, CGI-wise, because if I do ignore it, I'm allowing myself to completely engage with all the other things going on in the film, that the film is done well. Well, it isn't done well in this film. So and that's maybe it is because they're reacting to shitty non-existent CGI. Maybe that's part of the reason. And I just found it so boring and so dull. You get this Charles Dance mini beginning of a romance early on in this movie as well, and then he gets killed, and okay, fine. Why is that there? Why is anything here in this movie? And the movie, when you went with the movie, so I guess you'll be more forgiving for those things, but I'm telling you, if you don't go with this movie, this is pretty abysmal, man. And, you know, this movie does take some big swings as well. It's pretty cool that the characters have shaved their heads. It's pretty cool that Ripley's shaved her head. This is almost the definitive image of Ripley, actually, at this point in the culture, perhaps. I remember her more with a shaved head than anything else. It is pretty ballsy to have the main character impregnated with the queen's eggs and kill her off. So the movie is taking chances, and the movie is trying things, or at least at one point it was meant to try things. It's a very depressing, nihilistic atmosphere in this movie, but there's nothing more nihilistic than the finished product, I would say. But there is ideas in there that are different. I will give it that. The final act of them running through doors, trying to put down the shutters, was very unexciting. Very hard to follow, in fact. A side note, I thought the Henry Seliss character was actually Varys from Game of Thrones, so thanks for clearing that up. Yeah, it's just not very good. It's very disorientating, and the staging of that final scene was, or final third of the movie, was just pretty bad. And there was something else I was going to say now that's oh yeah, I think this is the first time we get to see a POV of the alien's view as well, going through those corridors. And it's an interesting idea, but the execution is terrible. And it's pretty unforgivable, considering when we see the Predator's point of view in Predator, we get all these extra things to make it seem more immersive. We get the infrared. I think we can hear the Predator when we get the point of view. In this, a lot of times the camera shows us the alien's point of view, and it's so distracting that it's just someone going around with a camera, and it's very smoothly done. but it almost feels like one of those screensavers that in the early days of Microsoft, in the early days of Windows, should I say, where it just is going through the motions, and it just felt like a good idea. Maybe Fincher came up with the idea, and then he was fired. One of his alleged 3 times he was fired, and someone else tried to take up that idea without the vision of his. And there is footprints of Fincher's directorial style in here. It's actually more reminiscent of Fight Club. Not Fight Club. What's that one? Panic Room. Than anything. It reminded me of that, maybe that kind of version of Fincher, and maybe that's the type of movie he might have made. Because we know he can do this, but maybe people were picking up his pieces and trying to take the reins after him, and that's why we're left with something that seems like a good idea, like the POV of the alien, but at the same time it just doesn't go anywhere. But to answer your question about Alien Resurrection, I think she is cloned and spliced with the Queen's DNA. Should be quite cool.
Hey Matt, just put the toddler to bed. Just relaxing a little bit before I have to go down and make the dinner. Yeah, very contrasting experiences we had with this film. I do think it's somewhat informed by the fact that you're watching it in context as part of the Alien franchise. And of course I am as well, but like not nearly to the same extent. I'm just watching a film that I've been curious about for years, wanted to revisit for years, kind of heard various things about, and then just kind of sitting down and watching, if memory serves, the first big special effects blockbuster that I've seen in a long time. Like, you know, I guess weeks, or, you know, it's been a while, so it kind of worked as a sort of spectacle movie for me. I can't believe they cut that opening scene on the beach. I mean, that is probably the most visually striking scene in the whole movie. That's kind of like Denis Villeneuve's Dune level of cool visuals. So, yeah, it's things like that that kind of got me on board. I was definitely on board for this movie with the first act. I agree with a lot of what you've said. Although calling it worse than Alien Covenant is, you know, you've certainly contextualized that as like you went into Covenant thinking it was going to be terrible and you had fun with how terrible it was, and you can't really have fun with the bad things about Alien 3 because they're just not that camp or silly. They're just sort of dull and boring, the bad things about it. But yeah, Alien Covenant for me was punishing to get through the one time I saw it. Oh, by the way, when I say it's a school night, that just means I got work the next day. I've always said school night my whole life, just to refer to up too late for what I have to do the next day. But yeah, just hitting a couple of the points that you made in your note there. It's hard to know whether there was a Terminator 2 / Sarah Connor influence on this movie. I mean, it came out, I think, about 10 or 11 months after Terminator 2, and they're both special effects movies, so they both would have been shot long before they were released. So, I mean, I'm assuming that production on, or like at least shooting of Alien 3 would have started before Terminator 2 was released. Now, of course, there could have been some, like, you know, the direction that Terminator 2 was going to take with Sarah Connor could have been known. I doubt that the end scene falling into the lava or whatever was they got the idea from T2, but maybe the change that you mentioned of removing the chestbuster thing or something was part. I don't know. It's interesting actually hearing you list off the changes from theatrical to assembly. Some of them are improvements, I think. Improvements in the theatrical version, like for example, removing that completely pointless subplot of them capturing the alien but then straight away laying it out, and the kind of flimsy characterization of that mad guy who lets the alien out, like that, just, we're not sold on that. A lot of the things that you feel are really shallow and have no depth or explanation in this movie, I disagree. I think there is more to this film than you got, but I think when you're hating a film, then you're going to miss out, I think, on some stuff that maybe works a little bit better if you're on board with it. You're kind of, maybe assuming the best of it. Because I would say that for Alien 1 and Alien 2, or Alien and Aliens as they're called, that there is, you're given little morsels of who people are, where they're coming from, what their character is, what their job is, what their role within the movie is. And you extrapolate from that and you feel like you're getting fully fleshed out real characters. But you're not necessarily given too much material to work with. It's just they're masterpieces. So, you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt. In Alien 3, I did feel like the characters were mostly, well, not mostly, but often well developed. I thought like 85 was well developed for me. I thought Charles Dance, the Doctor character, was well developed, certainly. I thought that the Warden, he gave me enough for that person, for that character. I'm not saying these are the best characters we've ever got across the franchise, but I do think there's more. I think this movie has enough going on, kind of, in terms of its lore and its world building. I didn't find that shallow. I get that it's like, why is it set in a prison? Because it's cool. Why is it like, they don't really have the answers to back up most of this stuff, but also don't mind that. Like, I don't think I would hold that against. It's like, why are they sending Marines in Alien 2? Because it's like, oh, well, 8 Marines, cool, shoot aliens, guns. It's not the deepest franchise. In fact, it's only become worse as it's become deeper, I would argue. But yeah, the parallels with Sarah Connor are interesting. Obviously, movies came out at the same time. They are two of the most butch and masculine female heroes in a major Hollywood movie that we've ever seen, even to this day. Like, if you compare it to what we're getting decades later with something like Black Widow, they still have to preserve the sex object element to this day, and probably will for decades more. It's interesting looking back at this little brief period where they were launching a giant, massive, big blockbuster movie with a female lead where she's not sexualized and she's like a very independent woman. Like, that's pretty cool. I mean, even the way she like hits on Charles Dance and she's like, oh, I haven't got laid in ages, do you want to have sex? Like, it's very casual. It's just, we just don't see that kind of stuff. And you're right that the shaved head Ripley has sort of become the iconic Ripley. It's amazing that scene that Fincher was refused the scene where she's like, the poster of the movie, the probably top 3 most iconic images in the whole franchise, that he had to fight tooth and nail, was still refused it, and then had to shoot it guerrilla style on his own. Like, the level of support that he was getting from the studio is unfathomable. I know he was a nobody, but like, it really feels like the studio bungled this and mismanaged it. If they fired him 3 times, then the next movie he makes is 7. Like, that is, that says it all. But I think the stuff about the characterization of Ripley being maybe like a betrayal of who she is, I can't really track that. I haven't seen the movies close enough together. As you said, like, you're normally not inclined to care about, like, they changed the character, but in this one you feel like they lost a lot there. I like her in Alien 3. I do think it's quite a dull movie, and she doesn't have much to do. There's no getting away from her, you bitch. Like she's not given heroic moments. There's no. The problem with this film for me is that it doesn't have the thrills, as you said. It doesn't have the spectacle in terms of action and thriller crescendos and climax. It doesn't have any of that cool stuff. So if you don't give Ripley stuff like that to do, then you'd lose a lot. Not from Ripley, but literally from any protagonist in a kind of, horror, thriller, action, sci-fi type movie. You need to have that up your sleeve. And when you don't have that, then it makes the protagonist look bad because they don't get any of that cool stuff to do. But I think Sigourney does a good job, and I think that the direction they took the character I'm happy with it. I'm fine. Like, I'm happy with her getting more and more hardened as the films go on. And also, like, I might feel differently if I was watching them all together and I was trying to look for some big kind of cohesive thing, but I kind of look at sequels as like, do whatever you want because the other films exist, and I'd rather they experiment and fail than try and just repeat. Because let's say you go for a repeat. I mean, you watched the Ocean's 11 movie recently. Like, I think Ocean's 13 is like an attempt to repeat the success of Ocean's 11, and it's certainly better than the failure of Ocean's 12, but it's not as good as Ocean's 11. So what's the point of it, really? I guess the point of it is like when they bring out the expanded edition of an album that you've always loved, and you're like, oh, now I get like 5 more songs that are significantly worse than these songs I've been loving all my life, but also do have some of that. They hint at the magic of the album that I love. So yeah, I guess I love this album so much that I want to get a bit more of similar, and that, yeah, I don't know. I'd rather they take a big swing, because occasionally you get a Terminator 2 or an Aliens where they completely change the movie and it's amazing, whereas repeating the movie and it's amazing is hard to think of examples outside of maybe like the Bond movies or something, where they're so in the machine of just making sequel after sequel that they've got it down to a formula. What you said about like the alien itself, like how they build up, and maybe it's different if it's grown inside of an animal. It's interesting that that in the theatrical cut it's a dog, because it does move like a dog. It doesn't really remind me of an ox, but it does remind me of a dog. And she goes, as you said, I've never seen one like this before. I mean, she's seen hundreds, I can't remember how many are in Aliens, but there's a lot, right? She's well exposed to the xenomorphs at this point. And when she says, I've never seen one like this before, that's your classic kind of trailer line. And you go, I've never seen one like this before. In other words, I've never seen one that poses this much of a threat before, right? We're escalating it. It's a new territory. Like, no, we've never seen one this unformidable, this shit. Like, we don't get a queen in this movie. I'm also not a fan of the need to escalate things in every movie, because before you know it, you're in Fast and the Furious territory, where it's like, we've done everything that we can do, and anything after this is just shit. It's boring, it's silly, it has no gravity, but we can't go backwards. I hate that. But it is interesting watching Alien, where you've got one alien and it's incredibly threatening, then Aliens, where you've got millions of aliens and they're incredibly threatening, then Alien 3, you've got one alien and it's less threatening than the alien in the first Alien. It doesn't even feel like they're trying to make it more threatening. It's like the threat in this movie is much more the consequences of the alien biology getting out from this planet and sort of propagating through the world. That's the threat. This particular alien killing them feels like, yes, it's a threat, of course. Like, it is a formidable foe, but it's just nothing on the level of what we've seen in the first two movies. So that's one of the many flaws of the movie. I mean, like I said, I can agree with a lot of what you said, and I just was on side, and I loved the visuals in the first act of the film, and I haven't got the basis for comparison. Like you're talking about the sets are shit compared to Aliens. You might be right. I can't remember that. I do think it gets progressively more visually boring as it goes on, but I think there is good stuff to see if you're just watching a movie on its own grounds. I do remember hearing that one of the early ideas for this movie was that it would be all set on a wooden spaceship, which is interesting. I guess this was a film that had not only a troubled production with Fincher, but I think was a bit of a development hell movie with lots of changing scripts and stuff like that. So there's probably, I don't know if there's ever been like a good documentary made about the making of Alien 3, but I'd certainly be up for watching it, because like some of the anecdotes you're quoting there they make the making of this film seem a lot more interesting than the film itself. What you said about they didn't have to so callously do away with Newt, that they could have made it so that she's alive and she's off with Hicks somewhere else. And I feel like if you're going to go with this plot of she's been in like hypersleep or whatever since Aliens, and she just like her shuttle crashes onto a beach. If you're going to go with that plot, then, you know, for there to be aliens or an alien at least on this other planet, it has to have been in the shuttle with them. And I guess it could have failed to kill any of them, like not managed to get into their tanks. But I think it's a good idea for a movie. Like it is, as you said, the idea that the hero is doomed. It's like DOA or something. She's impregnated with an alien, so she's actually not just the hero, but she's the threat of the movie embodied, like walking around. And the alien, in true kind of like animalistic fashion, it's like impregnated one of them and then killed the other two because they're useless to it. That functions well. I think there's very much a plot justification for killing Newt and Hicks here. It doesn't feel like a thing of like, oh, they didn't want to pay for those actors back, or they thought that they just wouldn't fit in with the movie. It's like, no, it kind of makes complete logical sense within the plot of the movie that they would be dead. But yeah, I guess they could have changed it to a different plot and had them be alive, but I don't really care. As you said, it's a miracle that James Cameron managed to make Newt work in a movie. One movie is plenty of Newt. I can't think of anything less appealing. And I think this might be the one time where we'd agree on that Alien 3 could get worse. If there was Newt as a sort of like sidekick, smart kid doing like MacGyver tricks, wiring something up and saving the day, pulling the thing at the exact right time to trap the alien, like that would be completely unwatchable. And yeah, just like a few stray like comments that you made, like I also thought it was Varys from Game of Thrones before I figured out it was Henry Sellers, and I was like, it is the guy from Game of Thrones, but he's different. Like is it just because he's thinner? And I kept on coming back to it, and I kept on being like, something's telling me it's not him. And then I was like, wait, one cotton picking second, it's Henry Sellers. Like, you just never expect to see Henry Sellers in anything, but certainly not in the Alien franchise. And yeah, that end climax of them just continuously running down corridors, running through doors. You've got no sense of place. I mean, think this is the franchise that gave us the proximity beeping sensor thing. Like, it's had such great ways of showing the stakes of the moment and where we are and everything. And to just have like an endless montage of them running through corridors, shutting doors. You don't know where anyone is. You don't know what timing is required or who has to do what. As you said, it's confusing. The heroes of the movie aren't even doing anything. They're in another area, just standing and waiting for the whole fucking thing. It's useless. And really, the two things that we get in terms of like them doing a plan or them trying something is that sequence, and then the sequence of them trapping the alien, which they then immediately free. So look, the individual kill scenes are okay. I think they're very much mid-tier to low tier in terms of like monster movie kill scenes, but the gore is good. I think there's some really nice shots of like blood splattering and stuff like that. I think some really beautiful like combinations of oily, like oiled up mechanic skin and rusty old machinery and blood splatters and alien goo. And I think there's a lot of like texture and stuff in this movie that I really like, which elevates some of those scenes. They're not the most thrilling scenes. They're certainly not like well staged, like they don't have any tension or anything like that, but you know, they're okay. But then the two major sequences that are plans of them trying to achieve something are just not good, and just probably the worst in the franchise. I mean, I don't know if you count the Alien versus Predator movies as part of this franchise. I do remember seeing Alien versus Predator in the cinema and thinking it was terrible. Again, I wouldn't say Alien Covenant bad, because Alien Covenant just goes to a new level. It's like one of those rare movies that you kind of once every few years see a movie where you're like, oh shit, movies can actually be way worse than I thought. But yeah, in terms of like making an Alien movie, it just doesn't get right. Alien 3 I'm talking about just does not get right the things you need to get right. I really want to see Resurrection now, because I know the first two movies so well. I know Alien 3 really well now because I've just seen it. I know Prometheus really well because I liked it quite a lot. I was like one of the defenders of that movie, and I think I've seen it a couple of times, or if I've only seen it once, it left quite an impact. Alien Covenant, I don't know, but I know it. I have no idea what happens in that movie. I've kind of erased it all from my memory, but I remember the like experience of it, like what it's like, what complete shit show of like chaotic ideas and just no clue what it's doing it is. Whereas Resurrection, I'm just like, I saw it late 90s, like probably when it came out on video or something, and it's just almost anything could be happening in that movie. I'd only remember one scene. I won't actually say it now because you're about to watch it, but I do remember one kind of like the scene, the iconic scene in Alien 3. There's like a moment in Alien Resurrection that like sticks out to me as being like, okay, that's sort of like the most memorable bit for one reason or another. But the general kind of like who's in the movie, not cast wise, but character wise, like what people are up to, what's the goal, where's it set, like what's the threat, like the whole kind of makeup of the movie, I don't have a clue. So yeah, might give it a look. Yeah, I'm not sure when that'll be. Very excited for Romulus though.
Yeah, to be clear, I am by no means saying that Alien Covenant is a better movie than Alien 3. I'm just saying I had more fun watching it. And by more fun watching it, I remember the first time I seen it, just like you, I was thinking, wow, things can get really, really bad sometimes. Things can get Alien versus Predator bad if they're not calmed down. Like, I don't know who in the fuck got hold of this franchise and the whole of this script. Why is there an android with a hood going around like Obi-Wan Kenobi on a foreign planet when he is a fucking android? Why would he go around on a hood on an island, on a planet, should I say? with only aliens there. Why would he do that? Anyway, so the first time I watched it, I thought it was absolute dog shit, which it is. But at least this time I was expecting it. So when I watched it this time in my rewatch, when all the absolute dumb stuff was happening, I was expecting it, so I could kind of laugh at it. I could laugh at the stupidity, and I got more enjoyment than out of Aliens 3. I didn't enjoy it by any means, but at least I could just laugh at how ridiculous it is. And we do get that one great sequence where Michael Fassbender's character drops basically like a Hiroshima's worth of aliens onto the Prometheus planet and wipes them out. So that scene was pretty cool. But back to Alien 3. Yeah, probably have to strongly disagree with just that the characters have any context or writing to them that isn't just a muddled up mess because of all these rewrites. Even the one you bring attention to, the 85 character, apparently they only come up with the 85 IQ during filming, and they decided to spring it on him, the actor, and I think the actor, Ross Brown, he refused to do it, and he was summoned to the producer's house, to like Walter Hill, who's involved in all of them, who's the director himself, I believe, and they basically got him to play the character a completely different way after the initial few scenes. This is based on an interview years later by the actor, or maybe a podcast actually. But yeah, so he had to change how he plays the character a little bit into production. I think other things were rewritten a bunch of times as well. So in the theatrical release, a Xenomorph comes out of Sigourney Weaver at the end, but they removed that in the director's cut, because obviously they only put it in because they wanted to make it different to Terminator 2. So it's not unfathomable that they changed stuff because of Terminator 2 in the way of Sarah Connor either. If they changed the final scene and added something in as a reaction to something. And you mentioned as well, it's not like they couldn't afford the actors to come back. Well, apparently Michael Biehn, that is his name, he was really fucking pissed off that they didn't ask him to come back and refused to allow his likeness or anything of himself to be used in the movie, whereas Newt, the girl, whatever her fucking name is, played ball, obviously, because she wasn't much of an actor. So eventually Michael Biehn allowed a picture of himself to be used in that scene. And I think, memory serves me right, I think it cost as much as his salary in the first movie. Now, I might be wrong on that, but I think it cost loads for them to get his likeness or image in any way. And yeah, you're right. There is a plot justification for killing them off. However, the second the film doesn't work out, the justification goes away. Because you need to make it work if you're going to do something like that. If it was a more coherent, better film, then no problem. Nobody has a problem with Newt and Hicks dying. And you mentioned the Marines and everything like that. Yeah, but they have a much more stronger functional reaction. They've lost contact with the planet and they're sending them down to see what's going on. That's fine. And in all the movies, they do enough motivation, and even you mentioned, yeah, they are very, very slight archetypes, but how they go about it so consistently, like how the archetypes would go, and maybe are more relatable, that you don't need more because you believe these guys act how they should act. Like I said, with the black guy and the Henry Dean Stanton in the first one, they're constantly concerned with their bonuses. They're constantly concerned with doing the grunt work, and everything is built around that. So even though they're slightly drawn, you can relate to these guys. You can relate to these guys if you work in a factory or a shit job, you know? Whereas I guess maybe it's the same thing in Alien 3, but it's hard to relate to madmen and psychopaths and prisoners, so you don't get the same kind of end. Incidentally, Charles S. Dutton, who's playing the preacher type character, actually went to jail a load of times, and I think he even fucking did a load of shit while he was in jail to extend his sentence. I think he went to jail for quite a few years, so a lot of the type of prison thing was drawn on his experiences. So I don't know what that says about his experience in that way, but that's another interesting wrinkle. But yeah, I think for me, this was just not a good time. And I also feel like you that it is okay to change a character. It is okay to take a swing. But I feel like when you dumb down a character whose trait specifically was intelligence and survival instinct, and you get them doing strange things, it starts to disorientate you from what you liked about the character. So I think it is okay to change things, and it is okay not to completely redo the same thing again and again. But you need to make it work somewhat. Otherwise, why are you doing it? And like you said, I guess we'll fundamentally disagree on if Aliens 3 works even as a standalone. I don't think it does. I think it's a pretty bad movie, even as something not linked to the franchise. But it was pretty cool that you got the opportunity to watch it on completely different terms to me, which I think really was a great way to have the conversation, actually.
Your mailbox is full. Please delete new or stored messages which you no longer need so that new messages may be received.